Welcome back to the GSMC Hockey Podcast. Sorry, I pressed the button a little bit premature there, but we are back with our second segment of the night, talking about what is next for the Edmonton Oilers as they are the losers of the Stanley Cup Final. I ran out of time in that first segment, but I was going to talk about the line changes that Chris Knoblauch had, and I guess I could kind of tag it on to this segment, talking about the Edmonton Oilers, because it does kind of tie in with like what's going on with this Edmonton Oilers team. It was interesting, to say the least, seeing what Chris Knoblauch was doing in that third period. It truly felt like if McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman couldn't give them the last 10 minutes, Knoblauch wasn't confident with any other forward group getting out there and playing well. I mean, he played McDavid. I gotta look it up. I don't know if NHL keeps time on ice stats in their box score. Hopefully they do. They do. Evan Bouchard played for 27, almost 28 minutes. Connor McDavid played for 26 minutes in this game. Zach Hyman played for 25 minutes in this game. Leon Draisaitl played for 22 minutes in this game. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to talk about. That team didn't feel confident with anybody else besides those three going out there. And when you have forwards like Nugent Hopkins, Dylan Holloway, Evander Kane, who was a scrap... Oh, we got to talk about that. You're paying a guy $5.125 million for the next 2 years, and you're keeping him out as a healthy scratch in the Stanley Cup Final because, well, it wasn't working with him. They didn't trust in anybody. And it's fair because nobody really showed up. I mean, you won the games that you won because McDavid in Game 4, McDavid Game 5, Draisaitl Game 6. Those are your big guns. So you're relying on them, but you can't just run them out there for 10 minutes straight and pray that something happens within that time frame, because their legs are just going to fall off the wagon. And the wheels really did fall off the wagon for the Edmonton Oilers and for McDavid and Draisaitl. When it came to the pulling goalie, when it came to the 6-on-5 situation, they were dead. Like, you could tell that McDavid and Draisaitl couldn't skate any longer. And, yeah, that's just... It's not why they lost. I mean, not being able to score for 54 minutes in that game was why they lost. But you got to rely on other guys. Like, those three players need to be on the bench for some time, right? I mean, playing for half the game as a forward is not something you're used to doing. As a defenseman, maybe that makes sense. And those guys just are conditioned differently than forwards. They don't have to skate as hard through the neutral zone to do breakouts like the forwards do. This is the difference here. The defensemen are always lagging behind. The only time that they're really skating hard is when it's in a back skate. And they're skating hard in a back skate. It's different than skating hard in going forward. So they need to have more faith in depth forwards, because it clearly wasn't working. Sam Gagner, Sam Carrick were both healthy scratches at the end of that one. They also had Vincent Desharnais as a healthy scratch at the end of that Stanley Cup Final. All of those guys are unrestricted free agents coming up. I believe that all three of them do walk in free agency. Corey Perry is a UFA. That's a guy that I'm really interested to see what he does, as he... Well, he's been disappointed in the past 5 years, losing in the Stanley Cup Finals in 4 of the past 5 years. And in the other year that he didn't lose in a Stanley Cup Final, he lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's unfortunate. That's not the career. That's not the end to a career you want. He's now 39 years old, Corey Perry is, and I don't see him playing until he's 40. I think this is the year he hangs the skates up. Corey Perry with just such a fantastic career. If this is the end of it, of course he's a Hall of Famer. 2006 Stanley Cup champion on the Anaheim Ducks. Started his career from a very young age winning, and was really the heart and soul with Ryan Getzlaf of that Anaheim Ducks team. And ever since he left the Ducks, was trying to find himself, but hasn't been able to. However, he is still a fantastic player, fantastic career for Corey Perry, if this is the end of it. But for the forwards that the Edmonton Oilers have on contract, they have 7 forwards on contract going through next season. A big name that they're looking to extend is Leon Draisaitl. This offseason, you can expect him to get an extension. With the Edmonton Oilers, it seems like extension talks are underway and things are progressing with them. They're not going well, as the reports are saying. However, I do believe that it will get done sometime throughout this offseason. I expect him to be somewhere around 7 or 8, 12.5, probably matching a Connor McDavid contract, or I couldn't imagine them giving him less than they're giving Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid has also only have 2 more years on his contract, so we'll see what the timeline looks like in Edmonton. I don't expect either of those 2 players to play for another team ever again. The Edmonton Oilers have way too much scar tissue with letting Wayne Gretzky leave in a trade in the 90s, or in 1989, not in the 90s, but you let the greatest player of all time leave for the LA Kings, and you're still getting the ramifications of it. They're still called a little bit of a joke franchise because of that. There's a ESPN 30 for 30 on that if you guys want to look into more of that. But for the Edmonton Oilers, they only have 7 forwards under contract. It's Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, who's there for 4 more years. You have Evander Kane. You have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Ryan McLeod, and Derek Ryan. Seven guys, 2 of them are your depth pieces, but what's good for them is they have their top 6 pretty much. With Dylan Holloway being an RFA, you expect him to get a deal around $2 to $3 million for probably 2 years. Would make sense for Dylan Holloway, who didn't have the best regular season, but he's 22 years old. You expect growth out of the young guy there. I do expect fully for him to be back in Edmonton next season, but looking at the other pieces, a Warren Fogle might be difficult for them to re-sign. 28 years old, a UFA. He did play a pivotal role in this Stanley Cup Final, being kind of used all over the place. Wherever he went, that line seemed to produce. So we'll see if they're able to continue to produce. The Edmonton Oilers only have $10 million, though, on the backs of kind of big contracts that they have in the defense, and maybe Jack Campbell, a buyout contract candidate at $5 million. It seemed like the goaltending tandem of Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard worked very well for that team, so I expect them to use that going forward and maybe buy out or try to trade Jack Campbell, who's making $5 million, so that'll free up $5 million of their cap space. Go to $15 million. You have RFAs and Philip Broberg on the defense. You're only looking really for 1 more defenseman for your NHL roster, and maybe a depth defenseman from your AHL to be able to kind of come up and down. That depth defenseman could probably be, unfortunately for them, all their defensemen are kind of far away from the NHL. So maybe they do have to re-sign a Troy Stetcher, maybe a Vincent Desharnais if he wants to on a cheap deal, but Philip Broberg, Vincent Desharnais can definitely both come back. Philip Broberg, 23, and restricted free agent. But the problem for them is their forward core. They now need 4 forwards probably to round out, and probably they need more than that. But they're going to look to get guys on cheap contracts. Who's going to take a cheap contract? Well, Connor Brown probably will. Warren Fogle will surely not, but maybe that's who you spend more of your money on in this re-signing phase for them. Sam Gagner, 34 years old, could take a cheap deal. Adam Henrique, who turned provider for them a couple times in the Stanley Cup Final, could be on a cheap deal. Matthias Janmark on a cheap deal. So I think they'll be fine. They're going to be kind of running it back with the same core. They just made a Stanley Cup Final, though. So you can't be too disappointed in the fact that you're running it back with the same core. However, is it the core that you want? What I was talking about with their line changes from Chris Knobloch was it really showed that they were not confident in their depth forwards. So for me, I think that they're going to need to go out and get somebody. Go out and get somebody on that third line that can really make a difference in a game. And who can that be? I don't really know. Because all the names that are being tossed out right now are way too good. But Cam Atkinson is a name that's being tossed out that I can really see as a third-line scoring forward for you that can really turn a game. I know Gus Nyquist could leave Nashville. I think he's a UFA this year. Maybe... Those are the guys I can think of off the top of my head. But for the Edmonton Oilers, I think that they're going to need to go out and get a difference maker for their forward group that really moves the needle for them, as they just don't have that right now. And I think that's what they were lacking in the Stanley Cup Final. Again, they just made a Stanley Cup Final. I mean, this team's a great team with the best forward I have ever seen with my own two eyes, because I wasn't old enough to watch Wayne Gretzky play hockey. Connor McDavid is just, wherever he goes, good results will follow. And clearly what we saw in these playoffs is he is a clutch performer. Getting or beating Wayne Gretzky's assist record, winning a Conn Smythe on a losing team. First person to do that since Reggie Leach back in 87 was that? I don't know. Somewhere around there, 78. I don't know. I might be dyslexic and getting them two mixed up. However, the force forward to win a Conn Smythe this millennium. I mean, Connor McDavid is special, and having him on a team makes the team great. So whatever they do, the team's going to probably be a playoff team next year. But how do they win that cup? They were so close. They were one game away. They were one goal away from sending this into an overtime period. I mean, anything could have changed this game, and we could be talking about the Florida Panthers. What are they doing in this offseason? Because they have a lot of guys coming up, and they just lost the Stanley Cup Final, their second. But instead, luck had it that the Edmonton Oilers were the losers here, and now they need to just do a little bit more. I think they just need to go out and get a third-line scoring guy. I think that's what this team was missing. We saw that in the third period, and this might be a little bit too much revisionist history in my brain talking, but you're also going to need to rely on Evander Kane next year, who is going to be 33 next year, if I'm not mistaken, June 9th. Yeah, he's going to be 32 next year. His birthday is in the summer. August 2nd. I was looking at Zach Hyman's birthday. Zach Hyman's also 32. Evander Kane will be 33 next year. You could see some regression from a guy that you already saw a little bit of regression in the postseason with. It'll be interesting to see what the Edmonton Oilers look like next year, because this will be a cup contender. We'll be seeing them at the top of the betting odds. Not the number one team in the betting odds, but they will be towards the top of the betting odds coming into next year for the Stanley Cup Final. We'll see what they do in this offseason. I think that they do have some work to be done. I'll be interested to keep an eye on what they do. Third line winger is my guess for what they would do, but I'm not an NHL GM. I couldn't tell you. They also don't have a first-round pick in this upcoming draft, so we'll see how that affects the team. But that'll wrap it up for our second segment, talking about what is next for the Edmonton Oilers. When I come back from my second break of the night, we'll be talking about my 2024 NHL mock draft, part 3 and final part to it. I'm excited to get into that one. I'll be back in a second.